Hello there, and welcome to Nowhere to Hide. Today, we're going to be talking about why we need to be involved as citizens. Now, look, the legislature has been elected. It's going to be in session about a month from now, and they just elected some new leadership, both in the Senate and in the House. And there's some good news as well as some bad news, but the number one lesson that comes from this is you cannot sit back and be uninvolved as a citizen. And it's not so much a matter of because our brand of politics has to prevail so much as what's actually at stake. I've got details coming up.
Press club or bias all media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Well, Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot.
That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
dark money is influencing policy in our state.
Well, that's not how this works.
Once again, welcome to Nowhere to Hide. It's great to sit down every so often and just kind of go through some of the things that are at stake. It's not, politics is all about personalities, and we get caught up in, oh, is it this person? Is it this person? And, who's going to do the bidding of the people? Who's going to do the bidding of the, lobbyists? And those are very real concerns, but sometimes we can forget what is actually at stake. And so before I share with you some of the goods and bads of the House and Senate leadership that was taken care of yesterday here in the state of Idaho, I want to talk to you a little bit about what exactly it is that we stand for. And to do this, I'm going to lean upon an article here by Ron Nate, who is the president of the Idaho Freedom Foundation, Freedom and Families, and how the IFF is leading the way. It's important that you understand this because you will hear over and over again, oh, this extreme far run to the right. And yet, did anybody reasonably think even just a few years ago that we would be seeing headlines like, well, this university was really disappointed that the Boise State women's volleyball team forfeited games because they didn't want to play a man pretending to be a woman on the women's volleyball team? But that's the reality of where we are today. And so Ron kind of walks us back through some of the things that are at the basis of why do we do what we do. Now, if you think this is extreme, that is your prerogative. But for most people, what we're talking about is a normalcy that somehow is slipping away from us or being mandated away from us by woke corporations, woke individuals, and people pushing ideologies that they insist don't really exist. Ron says the principles of freedom and free markets are time-tested and enduring. They don't change with time and circumstances. However, when we consider protecting children and families, the times have definitely changed. The advancement of disturbing, harmful, and degrading debauchery toward children is often blatant and obvious. Kids are in danger. I think the best proof of this is you don't see the drag queens lining up to perform at the retirement homes. They want to perform for the kids. Now, Ron points out, the Constitution guarantees and protects our freedoms from government encroachments. But let's be clear, the constitutionally protected right to free speech does not include a right to harm or endanger children. Thus, the decline in current cultural conditions, which threatens our home, our children rather, and our future, means our laws must meet those challenges. So it's not a matter of we just need more government with our, point of view. It's a matter of this is protecting things that are under attack by others who are trying to use the political power of the state to implement their ideology. The leftists' plan of pushing moral degeneracy on us and on our children is by design and is, in a worrying amount of cases, protected and enforced by bad legislation. So it's time to fight fire with fire. Now, Ron says, so far, Idaho leaders and legislators have heeded parents' calls to stand in the gap between the would-be predators and children. They've already passed a handful of laws to combat this, and even more laws are in the works. And some of those proposals have posed interesting questions for us at the Idaho Freedom Foundation regarding freedoms and protections in a changing world. Now, listen to this part. The Idaho Freedom Foundation has always held to its standards of promoting liberty, preserving and protecting rights, resisting government growth, fighting Marxism, and advancing free markets. In 2014, the IFF developed the Idaho Freedom Index to hold legislators to those standards by measuring and publishing how their votes rated on rated bills meet those ideals. And for a decade, the index used the same 12 metrics of freedom to rate bills, and legislators earned grades based on their votes. Now, look, the same standard applies to every legislator. It's just a matter of how does it measure in terms of it affects our freedom, in terms of how it protects our rights, and how it protects or promotes or doesn't promote government growth. And, it all comes down to, is government operating within its proper function? So the agenda as we move into the new legislative session next month includes the following priorities. This is the Idaho Freedom and Family Agenda. It includes universal education choice, and not just choice within the government school, that of your choice, but real choice where the money follows the child and not just the system. Grocery tax repeal and property tax relief. How much more could you do with a little more money in your pocket? I think most of us would kind of like to find out. Eliminating DEI and wokeness in education, addressing illegal immigration, advancing sound money, and of course, encouraging government to spend less and spend responsibly. Now, again, I'm going to ask you, is that extreme? It is to people who believe that anything out of the control of the state is somehow, by definition, out of control. That's the siren call of the statist. And believe it or not, they come in all flavors. You will find Republican statists as well as Democrat statists. The bottom line is they want the state in charge. Now, let's talk for just a moment about some of the changes that have taken place as far as House and Senate leadership. This was a tweet that was put out earlier today from the Idaho Freedom Foundation. Despite the conservative mandate voters delivered in the 2024 election cycle, many of your newly elected legislative leaders have a failing score on those Idaho Freedom and Spending indexes. And the point here is not, let's beat up on them. It's, we have to be more engaged and we have to demand more when it comes to our representatives. So let's break down what some of those leadership changes look like. In the state Senate, you have Kelly Anthon as President Pro Tem. Also, Lori Hartog as Majority Leader. Assistant Majority Leaders Mark Harris and Caucus Chair has been Toes. Now, I want you to look at their freedom scores. These shouldn't be too hard to see. 48%. It's really not a passing grade if you want to get right down to it. Lori Hartog, a little bit better, 56.7%. Mark Harris is the Assistant Majority Leader, 37.6%. And then you have Ben Toes, who's actually, look at this, 85.4%. Look at the spending scores. Again, the lower the score, the worse they are doing in protecting you and protecting your hard-earned tax dollars. Now, again, this is not to condemn. These are people that we'll have to work with through the legislative session. But, given the mandate that you saw, not just in Idaho, but across the nation, it's a little bit surprising to see that this was the best that state Senate leadership could do. And this could very well prove to be a challenge in terms of getting some of the key points of the Freedom and Family Agenda passed in this legislative session. Here's the state House leadership. Okay, and again, these scores look quite a bit better, actually. Mike Moyle, 58.9%. Not quite a passing grade, but he's getting close. Jason Monks is Majority Leader, 64.4%. Josh Tanner, look at that, 89.9%. And Jaron Crane, 69.9%. Look, this is not to say that once a person has reached this score, they are forever tarnished. They need input. And I guess that's the point here, is that these legislators need our input as citizens. We can't just sit back and say, well, go do your thing. We've elected you and we trust you to make all the right decisions. We do trust them to a certain degree, but we also count on them to do what the citizens have asked. And that means your influence has to be felt as a citizen. All right. So with that said, let's now talk a little bit about some of the things that the Idaho Freedom Foundation is doing that's actually adding to that freedom index. The Idaho Freedom Foundation stands with parents, leaders, and children. For the first time since its inception, the Idaho Freedom Foundation is amending that index by adding a new criterion for such protections. And this is how it works. The new measure reads, does this bill promote the breakdown of the traditional family or the deconstruction of societal norms? Hardly extreme, but necessary. Examples include promoting or incentivizing degeneracy, violating parental rights, compromising the innocence of children, or conversely, does it protect or uphold the structure, tenets, and traditional values of Western society? Now, there's another aspect here as well, and that is, on a side note, we decided to discontinue the Education Freedom Index due to a lack of sufficient quantity of bills touching that topic. So instead, the Idaho Freedom Foundation added the Education Freedom metric to our Freedom Index to capture those bills. Here's what the new metric reads. Does the bill expand the government's bureaucratic monopoly on education, reduce family and student choice, or finance education based on an institution or system? That's pretty concise, isn't it? Conversely, does it reduce government coercion in education, expand education choice, or finance education based on the student rather than the institution? So these are things to watch for in the upcoming legislative session. And there's one more thing that I would really like you to keep an eye on, and that is January 9th at 12 p.m., Legislature 101 will be taking place at the Capitol. And this will be streamed live on Capitol Clarity, but you can actually attend this in person, and you're encouraged to come and attend it in person. This is where you will learn the ins and outs of how the Idaho legislature operates, how the process by which bills are advanced or introduced and so forth. You want to become effective as a citizen legislator rather, to make your influence felt. And you can do that. But for most of us, it just takes a little knowledge on how the system works. If you're serious about this and you don't want to just hand it off to, leaders to take care of it all for you, I would encourage you, be a part of this. They need our input. These are good people. And I think in most cases, they are there to really do the best by us, but sometimes they don't know what that is, or sometimes they need a little bit of guidance and input from the citizenry. That's where the responsibility falls to people like you and me. I'm Brian Hyde, and this is Nowhere to Hide.
Press Clever Bias All Media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Well, Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot. That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
Dark money is influencing policy in our state.
Well, that's not how this